Welcome, Alyse, to the Happy Healthy Caregiver podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Elizabeth. I'm really excited to chat today.
You have the best smile, I have to tell
Oh,
you. So if people are watching, they're gonna be like, "Yes, you bring the smile. I love it."
oh,
So
thank you
so
so much.
so lovely to have you here today. We're going to get into your story and everything that you're doing to help family caregivers. So we always do kick off the show with a little bit of words of encouragement and inspiration from the Happy Healthy Caregiver jar. So let's see what we got here, Alyse. La, la, la. Okay. It says, be strong for the things you can't control by simplifying the things you can. And that's by a fellow podcaster, Courtney Carver. She's talks about simplifying your life and all of that. So be strong for the things you can't control by simplifying the things you can.
I love that. Yeah.
I think so much sometimes we can just be like banging our head against the wall, and then you do have to kind of step back and think like, is there something I can do to really influence this, or is this really out of my control? Um, as a caregiver, I felt like I wanted less to take care of. Does that resonate with you at all, Alyse?
Absolutely. Absolutely. To get into it, my sister and I took care of both of our aging parents, one right after the other for a total of 8 years before they both passed away. And absolutely, I loved my parents, both of them dearly, but I definitely found myself hoping, wishing, wanting to do less, to just be able to enjoy my time with them, especially going through this relatively early in life in my 20s. But you play the cards that you're dealt, as I always say. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
just glad that I was able to have them for as long as I did. So
Yeah, you honored them well. You and your sister honored your parents well by taking care of them. And sometimes what I'm talking about, like less to take care of too, like I remember sometimes it just felt like caregiving was spiraling out of control. And sometimes work felt like respite, like it was like something I understood to do. But then there were times where I was like, I just want to start and finish something. Let me purge this drawer, or let me kind of just go through my clothes. And have less choices. Like at this point, I think I even made it so I had like a capsule wardrobe. I was like, I don't even want to think about what I got to wear. I just want to make it everything easier.
yep, absolutely. I definitely went through that phase of experimenting with, pre-prepared meal plans, meal delivery, and housekeeping, and all of those things that I could do to just simplify and streamline as much as possible. Since
Yeah.
no, when you're in the thick of caregiving, you never know when you're going to get that call that's going to disrupt the entire week, the entire month. And so, yeah, being able to simplify and streamline those other non-caregiving things can really make a difference in terms of sanity.
Yes. For sure. Well, tell us a little bit more about your caregiving story. At least you kind of allude to you and your sister. You are young people taking care of your parents, and both of your parents were physicians, right? Like, how did their professions inform your caregiving journey?
Yeah, absolutely. So my sister and I, as I mentioned, we took care of both of our parents, one immediately after the other, for a total of
Mm,
8 years. And so our dad had multiple sclerosis and diabetes, and our mom had Alzheimer's. So
mm,
we took care of dad in the last 2 years of his life, and then we took care of mom in the last 6 years of hers. And our mom was diagnosed with Alzheimer's shortly before our dad died. And it was the darndest thing. My mom gave such a beautiful and clear eulogy at my dad's funeral, and she declined so quickly, not even 2 weeks later. My parents were divorced, but they always stayed friends. Neither one of them ever remarried. And so my mom would call me just 2 weeks after he had died and said, hey, your dad hasn't called me back. I haven't heard from your dad lately. And so I had to tell my mom over and over again that, okay, dad's not calling you back because he died a couple of weeks ago. You gave part of the eulogy, remember? And it was, whew, wow. I wish that I was articulate enough to accurately convey just how gut wrenching that was. And yeah, to your point, they were both physicians, clinicians too. And those who have a medical background, this irony might not be lost on them. My dad passed from complications of multiple sclerosis and diabetes, and he was a physiatrist. So worked with a lot of patients who were suffering from movement injuries, worked with a lot of patients doing physical rehab, occupational therapy, and the like. And then my mom died of Alzheimer's, and she was a psychiatrist before
Mm,
she was diagnosed. So she spent her career healing the minds of others just to come down with and eventually die of Alzheimer's.
mm,
And it made navigating their care all that much more challenging because naturally they didn't want to go to the hospitals where they worked. They didn't want to see their peers, now being in this state where they needed the care. They also were very effective in convincing my sister and I for a long time that they didn't need the care because they were the experts in healthcare for a very long time until they weren't. So yeah, some unique challenges there as
yeah.
every story
How'd
is
you get
different.
over the hump of like, needing the care? I think, you know, that's one, even if you're not a physician, that folks or a clinician that people get faced with, is that denial and the refusal and the care. When did it become like, okay, enough's enough?
Yeah. So for us, me and my sister Lisa, we really had to do our own research into both diseases and be able to articulate to both of our parents where their expertise ended and where the expertise of other clinicians was needed.
Mm,
And so we really had to work on them in multiple conversations and make a case for it. And then they were able to get on board slowly over time.
mm.
But even then, it was a hard-won battle. My mom denied that there was anything wrong with her memory until the Alzheimer's took her voice and she could no longer speak. So,
Wow.
towards the end, we were able to get her into some neurologists, but she kept maintaining that, yeah, she was absolutely lucid the entire time.
Which is frustrating, right? If someone's not meeting you halfway and you can see that these support and services could potentially help them. And a lot of trial and error, it sounds like. Well, I know you had shared with me that you faced some challenges as a young caregiver. You're in your 20s, you're thinking about your career and potentially dating and things like that. What were some of the initial challenges you faced when you were taking on this caregiving role?
Yeah, absolutely. So if I'm remembering right, I was about 26 when my dad started needing care. My sister's 6 years older than me, so she was 32. And so, I was a few years out of undergrad, working my first job out of undergrad, starting to date a little bit and, going out with friends. And I was hit with this completely different life stage than all of my peers. In my peers' lives in their mid 20s, they were getting married and having kids and, saving for their first home. And that was just completely off the table for me because I was spending all of my non working time, my sister too, trying to keep our parents alive.
Mm,
And it created a strong sense of, I'll be honest, I'm not like proud to admit this, but there was a strong sense of jealousy there where I would look at my friends, for example, going to their parents' house for the holidays, and their parents were cooking and cleaning and taking care of them, and they could stay in their childhood bedroom. Over the holidays, I was trying to, get in those neurologist appointments while I had the time off of work, making sure that mom or dad, whoever needed help at the time, was dressed and fed to give the aides time off. It was a completely different life, and it was pretty isolating, lonely, and at times jealousy inducing.
hmm Well, that's authentic and that's real. I know even for my folks who had mobility issues, like people used to come and their grandparents would come and like play with the kids and take them away and um do those kinds of things. And there was a time even where it wasn't something that I had even mentioned, but my kids would mention, like, so and so's grandparent, we went and we had lunch with them and they asked all these questions about my life. And I don't really have that relationship like that with my grandparents. And I just thought, wow, this is it's different. It's different. So, and families are complicated for sure. Intersectionality, it's a hard word to say, but intersectionality is an important concept. And as a Black caregiver, did
Mhm.
you find that your gender and your race combined to create like some kind of a unique experiences? Like how did these factors shape your caregiving role?
Yeah, absolutely. So, in case anyone is not listening or not watching the podcast, I do identify as
She's
Black,
Black. Yeah.
and both of my parents were as well. And so, when it comes to gender, as we know, the vast majority of caregivers are women. And so, in terms of gender, I don't think that that necessarily played that much of a role in my caregiving experience. I don't have brothers, so there wasn't any room for that sort of gender disparity to play out. But when it came to race, there is so much nuance in taking care of a loved one who is a part of a racial minority in this country. Little things like, for example, my sister and I moved our dad into a senior community. And finding the right senior community for an aging parent is hard in and of itself. There's an extra layer of complexity when I was trying to find the right senior community for my Black father who grew up in Detroit during integration in the 60s
Wow.
and who was a college educated physician. And so it was important to find the community that was racially diverse, but it couldn't have just been any Black people. It had to be educated Black people like him. And there was an extra nuance there that other families might have to go through. One other example that I can share is something that happened with my mom, who grew up in the deep South. And so she had her own stories of growing up in the deep South as a Black woman in the 50s. So I'm sure you can imagine
Yeah,
what she was
no
going
doubt.
through. And the big thing with my mom was actually food. And this is something that came up recently with a caregiver who we mutually know named Usha. And
She's
so,
been on the show.
oh,
Yeah.
yes, we love Usha.
Hmm.
And she had the same issue with her mom, where her mom ate Indian food. She expected a certain type of cuisine. When she was in the hospital, she wasn't eating the hospital food because it was not what she was used to. My mom went through the same thing. She grew up in the deep South. She grew up on soul food, collard greens, sweet potatoes, mac and cheese. She's not going to eat the tuna fish salad at the hospital. So those are just two examples of some of the nuances that come into play when you're taking care of someone as a racial minority in this country.
Did you find that anything in the hospital situation or the senior living community, were they willing to kind of um, do anything special or different or kind of meet you there so that it was a more comfortable environment for your mom or dad?
Yeah, it really came down to precise individuals within these larger systems. So sometimes it's not even a matter of finding a diverse senior community, it's a matter of finding a community that has on staff aides who are either ethnically diverse themselves or very culturally competent and culturally aware, who can have that nuance and be able to speak with your parent or whoever in a way that they feel comfortable. And so my sister and I were able to find those few people throughout the system. For example, my mom's in-home care aide, we kept her at home. So the aide that we found towards the end, her name was Sylvia, was fantastic. And she also shared some cultural background. So there was just an understanding there that made things a lot easier. So systems as a whole, no, not necessarily, but
Yeah.
we were able to find those individuals that helped a lot.
Well, that's good. That's certainly good. And I think the media sometimes portrays caregiving in certain ways, right? Were there moments when the media representations of family caregivers didn't align with your experience as a young Black female caregiver?
Yeah, and I would take it a step further and say that there are so few media representations of caregiving for older adults in general. And those that are, across racial lines, I've always lamented that there has been an unwillingness to really go there in the media with just how dirty and gritty this work can be. There's a lot of uncomfortable bathroom things that you go through, uncomfortable financial things that you go through. With late stage Alzheimer's, it does tend to manifest and cause a lot of anger and sometimes violence in the patient. There were some times when my mom didn't and I didn't literally fight each other, but we definitely grappled a little bit, especially with showers. And those are the things that you just don't see in the media. And I
Mm-mm.
wish that more of that was represented. so that those of us who are or have been in the trenches could know that we're not alone and that our experience is not necessarily unique. These are things that everyone goes through.
Yeah, I think there's a couple individuals again, right? There's individuals trying to initiate change, and a couple have been on the podcast, Susie Singer Carter and Richard Louie, doing documentaries to try to and using their kind of status and media to really implement some changes there. Susie's doing something with No Country for Old People that's really exposing some of the things that are going on in nursing care. And then
Mm,
Richard Louis talking about his parents and kind of really showing the emotional side of caregiving,
mm,
particularly for a male caregiver,
mm.
and South Asian culture as well. So but there's, to your point though, those are individuals. Like it is not out there as much as we would like it to be. What are some of the things that, if you could wave a magic wand, Alyse, and instill some change in some of these areas that we've been talking about, what would you like to see happen?
Yeah. So if I had a magic wand to instill change, I would actually instill change in an area that we haven't necessarily touched on too much, which is financial support.
Mm.
One of the biggest things that I warn individuals about who are navigating this for the first time, especially for an older adult who might qualify for Medicare, which is, of course, a government sponsored health insurance for those over the age of 65. I always have to warn people, Medicare doesn't really cover in-home care. They don't
Long-term care, nothing.
long, yeah, yeah. There's a few loopholes here and
Yeah.
there, but they are few and far between. And it's hard for people to even conceptualize of that, of, oh,
Why
so
is that a big secret still? Like it does mystify me that that's
right.
news to people.
I have a theory. I have a theory that it's not necessarily that it's a secret, but I think it's just so hard to accept the fact that we live in a country that just lets our older loved ones kind of fend for themselves and forces their adult children, friends, and family to sacrifice their own financial livelihoods for them. I think it's just so hard to conceptualize that people protect themselves mentally by not really letting that in until unfortunately they have to. And like me, they start losing their money. And I remember the day that my sister and I both drained our savings just to pay for our father's funeral. And it's
Wow.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, that was the other surprising thing that I think a lot of people don't know is like even if you are a financial power of attorney for somebody, your POA ends at the point of death. And so you can't access even sometimes that money for the funeral and the memorial expenses. So it's almost like if you have some money set aside to kind of take it out so where you can access it um, more easily in that thing. And then how has it influenced how you're looking ahead? Because I know, caregiving changes us and it's like we're looking ahead into our future. You've got plenty of years left. Even I got plenty of years left. Like what steps would you take to kind of proactively prepare for you could never be too old or young, I think, to start.
Yeah. So, once both of my parents passed away, I did a lot of soul searching because I'm a software engineer by trade. And I looked back at that and I did not feel good about the fact that I have this skill set as a software engineer and I could potentially build something, anything, some sort of digital tool to help people navigate this. And I didn't take action on that when my parents were alive because I just did not have the emotional or logistical capacity. But after my parents did pass away and I did have that capacity, I started my company Care Co-Pilot, which is a
Yeah.
website that people can go to, carecopilot.co, that helps people navigate all the different services that they might not even know they need when they're going through this. So for example, you brought up, the power of attorney. A lot of people don't realize that you cannot manage finances for your parents unless you have that power of attorney. You can't
Right.
make medical decisions on their behalf unless you have a healthcare proxy. These are the questions that people don't even know to ask. And that's why I built this web app to help expose those questions that, again, people don't even know to ask.
Right, because it's our system is so fragmented, right? There's just pieces of this, like, and it's like a little
Yes.
treasure hunt, but there's really no treasure there. It's just kind of, it's just a hunt, frankly, a brutal
Right.
hunt to
Worst
try to,
treasure hunt ever. No treasure at the end.
no treasure. But, and then you have no time to really look for it. And so I think the fact that what you do through Care Co-Pilot helps fast track people to some of these topics and things that they might not even have considered. Like we're all kind of just floundering through this and learning new vocabulary and learning different terms and understanding what the resources are to talk to and what might be available to us. Even as you were caregiving, like what were some of the resources that kind of stuck out to you as like, ah, this is helpful?
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing that I didn't, there were a lot of things actually that I didn't realize until it was unfortunately more or less too late. I didn't realize that a lot of cities, even smaller cities, have adult daycare centers where
Mm.
your loved one can go to during the day. They can have meals, activities, be watched after. That's a real lifeline to some
It's
families.
affordable, more affordable.
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot of them do like sliding fees. Some of them are free if you're low income. That's something that I didn't know about until it was too late. One other thing that I didn't realize until towards the end was that, if you are a middle class family like ours, there's different things that you can do in order to get your loved one on Medicaid health insurance. And Medicaid does actually do a pretty good job of footing the bill in certain circumstances for in home care or for a senior community. I didn't even know how to navigate that. I didn't realize that there are professionals who you can hire to help you with that process. I didn't realize that there are professionals who you can pay by the hour. They're generally called geriatric care managers who can hold your hand through this whole process and show you everything that you need. There is just such a wealth of information out there, but those are the first few that come to mind in terms of things that I wish that I had known about.
Yeah, the Medicaid thing that you bring up is like, I mean, with my mother-in-law, I don't know. I think we applied 9 different times for Medicaid for her. She was divorced. She had no money. She had like $800 Social Security, supposedly too much money. And that, that does lead into like caregivers going into their own pockets. And I know we did to help pay for a lot of things for her. And then I don't, maybe you work with them too, Alyse, mynavigate.com. They help people kind of navigate through that red tape to kind of hopefully increase the chances of you getting approved more quickly and having those conversations at an affordable way. It's not available in every state, but I can share that for folks too. Well, let's go back to Care Co-Pilot. So you've lived this experience. You're a software engineer. I got a background in IT, product management, and all that. So and then you're like, this, there's got to be a better way, which is kind of the thing that all of us say, right? And when we're starting a new business as an entrepreneur, and by the way, entrepreneurship is a lot of work. It's a lot of work and it's not for everybody. But what are some of the things that people, when they go to carecopilot.co, like what would they, is it a website or an app? First of all, and then what will they find there?
Yeah, so today it's a website. We'll probably release a mobile app around this time next year, depending on what people request from us and when. So if you go to carecopilot.co today, you can do a few different things. We have a whole marketplace of pre-vetted service providers. So in-home care agencies, elder care law firms, and others that we as a team have personally vetted and vouched for and would use with our families.
Mm.
And you can find these service providers who can help you with some of the different things that you need and cut through the red tape of just trying to Google on your own and find reviews as best as you can. So that's one thing that you can benefit from with Care Copilot. Care Copilot also offers sort of a fun rewards program where you can earn reward points, kind of like airline points by doing certain things that you're already doing on behalf of your loved one, like getting that power of attorney. And you can earn points and cash them out for gift cards or use them as a credit on services. So that's been really popular as well.
I
Um,
love that. Let's
yeah.
gamify this hard work, this invisible labor that we're all doing.
Exactly, exactly. I mean, as we know, caregiving is, of course, emotionally fulfilling in and of itself. But aside from that, it's a very thankless job. It's because no one knows the extent of it but you, the person who's in it. And a lot of us aren't necessarily, we don't articulate that day to day nitty gritty of how our back might hurt because we're trying to lift our loved one in the morning. And so, yeah, we feel we're really excited to be able to reward some of these caregivers in the way that they deserve.
Yeah, I think sometimes we don't share that. My sister, we transitioned primary care from my mom, from me to my older sister. And when that happened, she had told me she's even afraid to kind of peel back some of that emotional layer and the deep work that caregivers do because she just thought she would just unravel, frankly. It's like you just kind of roll up your sleeves and you keep showing up and you keep doing it because if you step back to kind of even think about it, it could really, she was afraid she'd be in the fetal position in a corner, of burnout. And I don't want anybody to kind of get to that point for sure. So I love that you're providing ways for kind of people to proactively do things that's going to set themselves up for success and hopefully make this more of a sustainable thing with a sense of community. The resources that you mentioned through Care Co-Pilot, are they for all areas and states, or is it concentrated in for particular areas?
Yeah, so we're rolling this out to a few different cities at a time. So right now we have a pretty strong presence in New York City and Chicago, but we are rolling out more cities all the time. So stay tuned. And if you sign up for Care Co-Pilot and we don't necessarily have any pre-vetted services in your city yet, there's a way that you can indicate and get a notification when we're near you. And in the meantime, you can start earning rewards and connecting with other caregivers through the app, even before we have service providers in your city.
Yeah, so good. Talk a little bit about the community, because even you're doing it within Care Co-Pilot, but you're even doing it, setting up community in New York City. Why is this important to you?
Yeah, so we do have an in-person meetup. We organize it through meetup.com. And we have about 100 people in this group right now. And once a month, we get together in New York City. And Care Co-Pilot sponsors just a free event. One month we went and saw a Yankees game. One month we did a cookie decorating class. Another month we went and got foot massages. Last weekend, we went to brunch at a really fancy place here in New York City in the meatpacking district, which sounds gross, but is very fancy. And so it was important to me to set that up because when my sister and I were going through it, really was no organization out there that truly saw us and rewarded us and acknowledged us for the work that we were doing every day. I mean, I would have killed for anyone to say, you know what, Alyse, you're having a really hard time. Let me just take you to brunch and like treat you to a massage. That never happened.
Never happened.
And
No.
so it's really important to me to be able to provide that to other people who are still in the thick of it.
Yeah. I mean, that's what informed my business too. I felt like as a family caregiver, I was being should on a lot, SHOULD.
Mhm.
Like you should be doing, my mom had lots of things, diabetes being a big one too. And, I should be doing this for her nutrition. I should, everywhere I went, it was just like adding more stuff on my to-do list. But to
Yeah.
your point, nobody was saying like, "Oh, wow, you have kids and you're working a full-time job and you're doing this as well." Like this must be a lot for you. Here are some resources that can help you. Here's some support that can help you.
Yeah.
And I want that to be changed. I want, people to go into these settings and be like, here's Care Co-Pilot, here's Happy Healthy Caregiver. You can listen to podcasts, there's communities and people that could completely change their care experience.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I think that that's what people really need right now.
For sure. Um, well, I hope people check out Care Co-Pilot. We're gonna check that in there. You mentioned earlier about like when your dad died and your mom, caring for mom and how she was changing with her dementia. And in your words to me earlier, you had said that you wasted a lot of time and energy trying to interact with your mom as the person that she was instead
Mm.
of the person that she had become. And so I just maybe share a little bit about that because I see that as a common thing when I'm coaching people as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember making an Instagram video about this as well. As I mentioned, my mom was a psychiatrist, a board certified psychiatrist. She had been practicing for many years once the Alzheimer's started to take over. And she was always so logical, so practical, so organized, so articulate. And so when those things started to break down, it was really hard for me to see it for what it was. And I would spend so much time arguing with her. And, I was also, young as I was going through this. When I was in my 20s, I didn't know anything about Alzheimer's and how it worked. And I'm embarrassed to say that I would give her a pretty hard time about it and say things like, Mom, you locked yourself out of the house again. You got lost driving to my aunt's house that you've been to every month for the last 50, 60 years.
Yeah.
And I spent a lot of time just like giving her a hard time and not really meeting her where she was and trying to force her to stay in the state that she was and force her to remain the person who she was, instead of just acknowledging the fact that her brain is different. My mom is different. Things that she could do a year ago, she cannot do anymore. Things that we could talk about a year ago, we cannot talk about those things anymore. And there's no turning back the clock. We're just going to have to move forward from here. And yes, exactly. I wish that I would have spent less time arguing with her and trying to force her to stay in the state that she was, instead of just accepting where she was and enjoying what ended up being the last few years of our lives together.
Yeah. I mean, I think when we know better, right, we end up doing better. And you were young, and give yourself grace and less guilt about it. And even I've got an older brother who's neurodivergent, and his brain is different, and so things that, like, we don't all agree in my sibling family of the five of us besides him on how he should be able to do things. Like, definitely, my brothers think he's capable of doing a lot more, and whereas I think the women and the sisters have a little more compassion and have been a little closer to it to see that. But one of the people, there's a couple of the people that I feel like have really helped in my education of that, even though they're more dementia specific, it still helps, I think, with being having a neurodivergent brother, is Teepa Snow
Mm,
and Adria Thompson with Be Like Care. And so because I love their videos. They're just very, and Dementia Darling too. Like, they're very specific
yeah.
about talking to people, um, and communicating. And Teepa says, stop driving off the cliff, and try something different if it's not working. So anyway, I just appreciate you being vulnerable about that and sharing about that. Let's flip gears and talk about your self-care. So we did a collaborative video. I've been really trying to focus on my Instagram, particularly on Thursdays, of working with other people in the care economy and really sharing what real self-care can look like for caregivers that's accessible and affordable and all of that. And so you shared your tip of how you squeeze in these little 2-minute workouts, even 30-second workouts sometimes in your day. So I'm gonna link to that, your mini workouts. But did you get your self-care in today, or have you been sprinkling it in, Alyse?
I did. And I still do my mini workouts. Some are longer, some are shorter, but most of them are half an hour or less. And yeah, a lot of them are 5 minutes or less. And so this morning I was feeling pretty low energy, but I still made a point to get out and just take a walk around the block this morning. And one other thing that I'll share is that when it comes to, getting that workout in and getting those endorphins, I remind myself that I'm not really doing it for the physical benefits, because I think that that's why a lot of people shy away from the physical activity. It's because it's really hard, depending on your body type, to see the physical benefits of it. But I remind myself that I'm not doing this to look good. I'm doing this to feel good.
Yeah.
I'm doing this because it lifts my spirit and gives me the energy to get through another day. And even the 5 minute workout can like get that heart rate going and get those endorphins going to help you have the fight that you need to fight another day.
Mhm.
So yeah, got my self-care in this morning for sure.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, I think everyone's got their own definition of self-care. Mine is, trying on things, and if they do provide me more energy or they give me peace of mind, I want to keep doing those. And so getting outside is very important for me. I threw away that scale a long time ago for working out and trying to change, and get into some kind of supermodel body. It's health at every size, but it is really more about how I feel. And I don't like the way that I feel if I don't, get outside or do some hot works or um, journal or do some of the things. And so listening to your body and kind of knowing what that is, and you know yourself best of what's going to work for you. We're different people.
Mhm.
So I can appreciate how you're infusing your real self-care in your life. Um, you sometimes you say that people, well, and I hear this all the time, right? Like people say, I don't have the time. I don't
Mhm.
have the time to do that. But you do say that it's an investment. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, yeah, and I get it. I think the challenge is that when a lot of people talk about self-care, they mean expensive and extensive spa days and shopping sprees. And realistically, so few of us have the time or the energy for that. But we might have 5 minutes, 10, 15 minutes a day to plant a seed that can grow more happiness for
Mm.
us. So, maybe your self-care routine is journaling, maybe it's working out, maybe it's something different that you can do in even 5 minutes or less. And you might not see the benefits from that right away. It might take you a few days or even a few weeks in order to really get that value from it. But just like, we invest in our savings and, you do it a little bit over time and it builds up and then you can have a great vacation. It's investing in yourself, in your own happiness, and knowing that even 5, 15 minutes a day is worth it because, and it sounds so corny and I've been there before, when I was in the thick of it, I always rolled my eyes when I came to self-care. But we all know so many horror stories of caregivers who have broken down physically or emotionally and not been able to care for themselves or the person who they're taking care of.
That's
So
right.
maybe there's some people out there who can't bring themselves to take care of themselves, but they can invest in themselves knowing that it's going to allow them to be around for somebody else. And so
Yeah.
maybe that's the motivation for someone. And if so, that's great too.
Yeah. However you get there, as long as
Yeah.
as long
Yeah,
as you're doing something to kind of make those investments, right? It's like,
exactly.
yes, yes. Well, speaking of self-care, I'd love to get your thoughts on some of the just for you daily self-care prompts that I picked out for you, Elise.
Oh,
So
great.
let's get your answers to some of these. If you had only one self-care product on a desert island, what would you choose?
Ooh, that's a really tough one. I would say some sort of nicely scented candle, especially one with the wood wicks, because with the wood wick, it makes that crackling sound like a fireplace, and I love those.
Yes, I hope that you throw a lighter in with that too, so you could light
Yeah,
it. Yeah, it comes
true.
with a
Yes.
lighter. It comes with a lighter. I love that. Um, what's what's the mantra that is currently keeping you motivated? Even if it's
Mm.
not Leslie about caregiving, but about entrepreneurship or whatever. Like, what is your saying that kind of feeds you?
Yeah, definitely. These days, as an entrepreneur, it's a quote from Michael Jordan, one of the greatest NBA players of all time. He said, "You miss 100% of the shots that you don't take."
Mm.
And that's definitely my mantra these days as I continue in my entrepreneurship journey.
Yeah, we got to throw a lot of spaghetti at the wall for sure and
Yeah.
see what sticks there. Who do you lean on for support?
Ooh, I have my best friend and I, Val, we've been friends for almost 20 years now. And I was actually just in her wedding 2 weeks ago. I was her maid of honor. And I feel so honored and privileged to have that ride or die friend. We call each other when anything happens, positive, negative. That's definitely who I lean on.
Gotcha. And then last question is, and I think sometimes we devalue ourselves as caregivers, but you deserve happiness because,
Ooh, I would say because everyone does. And even, what, that's such an interesting one. That one's really making me pause because it takes me back to, I'll give a try and be a concise story. When I was in college, I went to the University of Michigan. And during college, I volunteered at a sexual assault and domestic violence shelter. It's still there. It's called Safe House. And when I volunteered there, I can tell you that the women who I worked with in the shelter, some of these women had 3 kids, ran out of their house in the middle of their night with no shoes and the clothes on their back. Some of these women had such severe medical issues because their partner assaulted them so badly. I mean, it was really the things that nightmares are made out of.
Right.
And yet, so many of the women in this shelter had such overwhelming joy and happiness. They were happy just to be alive. They were
Mm.
happy just to have their children. And sometimes they had nothing else, truly nothing else to clothes on their backs. And so that's something that I remember and that I share when we talk about happiness and the fact that everyone deserves happiness. But not only does everyone deserve happiness, everyone can find happiness,
Mm.
even in the most dire of situations, like some of those women were.
Yeah. I sometimes think that those dire situations, going back to the bleak days of caregiving as well, like when you are kind of at this level of darkness and just kind of dreariness, and then something joyful happens, it's elevated. It's just like
Mhm.
it's like a diamond in the rough. Um,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you go for those, you seek those. And so that's why like a lot of times I encourage caregivers to make what I call a joy list, and with their
Mhm.
care recipients a joint joy list, so that your joys can overlap. And this is like little things like, what makes Alyse happy? Like maybe it's um for me, it's I like a wine tasting. I love a movie night. I love to play board games. I like to get out in nature. I love to pet my dogs. Like so those kinds of things where you can kind of meet halfway in the middle. And I
Mhm.
think the more of that you put and you sprinkle into your day, it will bring that happiness. Sometimes you kind of have to fake it till you make it.
Yeah, yeah. I know that this is a little woo woo, but I do believe in the idea that to a certain extent, our internal dialogue and internal thoughts really shape our reality, uh,
Mm.
for better or for worse. I think that we've all met some people who are a little deluded or a little bit like maybe have a very strong ego, but it really fuels them to make things happen. And on a more like wholesome level, the opposite is also true, reminding ourselves of everything that's positive, everything that's good, everything good that's going to come. It really does have a remarkable impact in, yeah, making everything just a little bit better.
Yeah, one of those things I remember is like I was really honed in on physical self-care when I was taking care of my parents because they did have so many physical things wrong with
Mm,
them. And I used to say, I have to work out, I have to do this. But even just like a little word change of I get
yeah.
to, like my mom was bedridden the last 2 years of her life. Like, look, I get to work out. Like what a glorious thing that is. Some people cannot do that, or like the women that you're talking about. So
Mhm.
yes, I love that. Well, anything else, Alyse, that you wish that we would have touched on today, that you want to make sure that we don't leave without sharing this? And then how do people learn more about you and Care Co-Pilot and get in touch?
Yeah, absolutely. In response to your question, I know that this has come up in multiple different podcast episodes, but I always like to hit home with the fact that this is a very, very common challenge that people face. Just because people aren't discussing it very openly doesn't mean that it's not happening. 1 in every 7 Americans are taking care of an adult over the age of 18. So this is very, very common. And so I always try and hit home and on that and remind people about that because it's so easy to think that it's just you simply because there's not a lot of visibility around it. So that's the final thought that I'll share. And then in terms of getting in touch with me or learning about Care Co-Pilot, I would encourage people to go to the website carecopilot.co. Check us out, create an account. There's a contact form there that you can fill out if you want to get in touch with me or a member of the team. And yeah, I'm just really happy to be here and connect with you again and spread the word about Care Co-Pilot and caregiving.
Thank you, Alyse. Thank you for all those great points that you brought up and just vulnerability today. And I'm grateful that you have taken your software engineering and your caregiving experience and really found a powerful way to kind of make a mark and help
Well,
family caregivers.
thank you. It's my pleasure and it's an honor.